The piggy bank triumph. 8-year-old Lila gripped her piggy bank tightly, her small fingers wrapped around its smooth, ceramic surface. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of pride and anticipation. For months, she had saved every penny, quarters from helping neighbors carry groceries, dimes from extra chores, and even a crumpled dollar bill from her last birthday. Her mother, Abigail Bennett, had taught her the value of hard work and patience, and today was the day she'd been dreaming of, her first trip to the bank to deposit her savings, just like a grown-up. Lila's sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished marble floor as she stepped into the towering building. The bank's grand lobby stretched out before her, high ceilings, sleek glass counters, and a quiet hum of activity. She wore her favorite dress, a bright yellow one with tiny flowers stitched along the hem, and her hair was neatly pulled back with a ribbon. Beside her walked Abigail, a poised and commanding woman whose presence seemed to fill any room she entered. As the CEO of a major corporation, Abigail carried herself with quiet strength, but today, her focus was on her daughter. She smiled down at Lila, her eyes warm with pride. "This is it, sweetheart," Abigail said, her voice soft but firm. "You've earned this." Lila beamed, clutching her little Percy, a hand-me-down from her mom where she'd carefully transferred her savings. She felt grown-up, important, like she was stepping into a world she'd only seen from the outside. But as they approached the counter, something shifted. The air grew heavier, and Lila's excitement faltered under the weight of an unfamiliar gaze. Behind the counter stood a teller, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and a pinched expression. Her name tag read Marlene. She barely looked up from her computer as Lila slid her small envelope of cash across the counter, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the thrill of the moment. The bills and coins inside clinked faintly as they settled. Marlene's eyes flicked to the envelope, then to Lila. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. Lila blinked, caught off guard. "I saved it," she said, her voice small but clear. "From chores and stuff." Marlene scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. "This is a lot of money for a kid. We don't just take cash like this without a parent's say-so." Abigail, who had been standing just behind Lila, stepped forward. Her tailored blazer and understated elegance made her look every bit the professional she was, but her expression remained calm. "I'm her mother," she said evenly. "This is her money. She earned it." Marlene's gaze darted to Abigail, sizing her up. Something in her face hardened a flicker of doubt, or maybe something uglier. "I'll need proof," she said curtly. "A bank statement, ID, something." Lila frowned, confused. She glanced to her left, where a boy about her age, pale-skinned, with messy blonde hair, was handing over a wad of cash at the next counter. The teller there smiled, chatting with the boy's father as she processed the deposit. No questions, no demands for proof. Just a nod and a receipt. Lila's stomach twisted. Why was it different for her? "I don't understand," Lila started, her voice wavering. "I just want to." Marlene cut her off. "Sorry, kid, but we've got rules. Fraud prevention. You get it." Her words weren't an explanation, they were a wall, shutting Lila out. Abigail's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. "What exactly is the problem here?" she asked, her tone measured but edged with steel. Marlene didn't flinch. "We have to be careful," she said, her voice flat. "That's all." A man in a suit approached then, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. His name tag identified him as Mr. Daniels, branch manager. He glanced between Lila, Abigail, and Marlene, sensing the tension. "Is there an issue?" he asked, his voice cautious. Before Abigail could respond, Marlene leaned toward him and muttered something under her breath. Lila caught only a fragment, "seems off," but it was enough to make her chest tighten. She'd worked so hard, followed every rule her mom had taught her. Why did it feel like she was in trouble? And then it escalated. 2 security guards appeared, their heavy footsteps echoing in the now silent lobby. One rested a hand on his belt, near a walkie-talkie, while the other gestured toward the exit. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you both to leave," the first guard said, his voice gruff. Lila's cheeks burned. Customers turned to stare, their whispers buzzing like flies. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the floor. This was supposed to be her big moment, her triumph, and now it felt like a punishment. But Abigail didn't budge. She stood taller, her presence a quiet storm gathering strength. Reaching into her purse, Abigail didn't pull out an ID or a bank statement. Instead, she retrieved a sleek, embossed business card and slid it across the counter with a calm that sent a chill through the room. Marlene barely glanced at it before rolling her eyes. "Ma'am, this doesn't change anything," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I think it will," Abigail replied, her tone icy and unyielding. "Mister." Daniels picked up the card, his curiosity piqued. As his eyes scanned the bold letters printed on it, his face drained of color. His fingers trembled slightly, and he swallowed hard. Marlene, noticing his reaction, leaned over to peek. Her smug expression melted into something else: shock, then dread. The card read, "Abigail Bennett, CEO and majority shareholder, Horizon Financial Group." This bank, this very branch, was part of her empire. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. The guards stepped back, their confidence evaporating. Customers murmured, craning their necks to see what had shifted the room's power so suddenly. Marlene stammered, her voice barely audible. You own. I own this bank." Abigail cut in, her words sharp and deliberate. "And I just watched you humiliate my daughter, treat her like a criminal for no reason other than the color of her skin." "Mister." Daniels fumbled for words. "Ms. Bennett, I assure you, this was a misunderstanding." "No," Abigail interrupted, her voice ablaze. "It was racism, and I won't let it slide." Lila looked up at her mother, her small envelope still clutched in her hands. She didn't fully understand everything happening, but she felt the weight of her mom's strength, the way Abigail turned the room upside down without raising her voice. Marlene, once so sure of herself, seemed to shrink, her hands trembling as she stared at the counter. "Deposit your money, sweetheart," Abigail said, her tone softening as she placed a hand on Lila's shoulder. Marlene's fingers shook as she took the envelope, processing the transaction she'd refused just minutes before. The printer hummed, spitting out a receipt, and Lila took it with a quiet sense of victory. Abigail's hand stayed steady on her daughter's shoulder as she spoke again, her voice low but resonant. "You will never have to beg to be seen, Lila. Not in my world." The moment lingered, heavy with meaning. It wasn't just about one little girl and her piggy bank. It was about something bigger, something that whispered in the shadows of policies and glances, in the way some were questioned while others were welcomed. Abigail had the power to turn the tables today, but what about tomorrow? What about the next child who walked through those doors alone? As they left the bank, Lila clutched her receipt, her heart still racing, but her head held a little higher. Abigail didn't look back, but the weight of what had happened stayed with her. She'd built an empire, fought for every inch of respect she commanded, and yet here, in a place she owned, her daughter had been made to feel small. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a call to keep fighting, to keep pushing, until no one else had to face what Lila did.